Hi, everyone. Harry here to talk about the release of the Ethics Committee report about Matt Gaetz. Now, there's a lot of ways to try to go at this, including what it does for him now that he's no longer a member of Congress, no longer a potential attorney general, but rather a conservative talk show host. Also about whether there's any hot water for him in the state of Florida, whose laws he violated again and again, including laws against statutory rape. That is, of course, if the Ethics Committee report is to be believed. And one quick note about that. I'm not opining here whether there could be proof beyond a reasonable doubt of criminal charges and whether he would have any legal claims, etc. But the Ethics Committee report, I think we can take as accurate, not 100% accurate, not, there's no possible thing he could say again at a trial. But this looks pretty well to be what happened, and let's just assume it is. If they totally botched it or cooked up a false report, the Ethics Committee, that would be extraordinary and shameful. I think what they're saying would hold up if you did a more in-detail investigation. They talked to a few dozen witnesses. They looked at 14,000 documents. They subpoenaed something like 25, 30 people. Interestingly, Gaetz only semi-cooperated. He apparently would pepper them with emails here and there, but I think he wanted very carefully to be in a position where he couldn't be said to be lying, among other things. That is a violation of, that's a felony if he would have lied to them in a purview of their investigation and 18 U.S.C. 1001. And that's a major difference that would have happened if there was a background investigation, a conventional one, of Gaetz to be Attorney General. It's the first thing he would have sat down with a FBI reviewing official and been asked all these questions point blank that if he lied about, they would be felonies. Okay, but lots of politically, maybe lots criminally with Florida. I just want to talk about this vis-a-vis Trump and the prospective nomination as Attorney General. And does this material, again, let's just assume it's true, and have the kind of standing objection that, they haven't proved it beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. But this seems the most likely scenario of everything that happened. And actually, let me lay out what happened. So for several years, he, with his co-conspirator, there's no other word for it, Joel Greenberg, who's now doing 11 years in the federal penitentiary, had this kind of technique. Greenberg would be the purveyor. He would use a website that is some kind of sugar daddy website where they would find young women, basically reach out to them and then go on sort of lavish trips with multiple women. And there would be typically both kind of group sex stuff and also a lot of illicit drugs and living high off the hogs and lobster dinners and the like. And that'll be relevant. I'll get to that in a moment. So that was the deal. Greenberg would find the girls, or, most of them were over 18. The one who was not, there's no evidence that Gaetz knew she was 17, but it looks as if she was. And they were, through an app that it's clear what it was about. Okay. So that's the facts. Now, what does this mean about Trump's prudence and public spiritedness? I know that's an oxymoron with him, but in advancing him in the first place, and what does it mean about whether he would have gotten through, etc. Okay, point one. Gaetz's defense has been, the feds exonerated me. Do you think Merrick Garland was taking a dive? And that is really a threadbare, silly defense that the federal government declined for whatever reason, and it looks to be because they were nervous about a particular witness, to bring federal charges against him, in no way exonerates him of this conduct, in no way undermines the whole thing. And it's really cynical and it's sophistry on his part to say, oh, they exonerated me. That's point one. Point two, the guy is, let's just talk about, now you're the Senate who has received this whole report on Gaetz. And what do you think? Should you advise and consent he should be the Attorney General? Okay. Second, even leaving aside, let's say you have very libertarian views about sex and drugs, etc. We're talking about a sitting congressman into his late 30s. This goes only till 4 years ago, and for all we know, the behavior continued. And like, what kind of idiot is a sitting congressman and engages in this totally, frat boy, nasty behavior that you would be worried about if they were 20 years younger? So there's a genuine issue if you're the Senate of like, what kind of judgment does this guy have? All right, but that's just the start, because the other thing you think about in the background investigations is there any kind of blackmail worry here? And here you have Gaetz, who would have put himself forward, and the Trump team that would have put him forward to be the chief federal law enforcement officer in the country with access to all kinds of national security information. And he's out there very publicly saying, I never, ever paid for sex. I never had sex with a minor. And think of all the people, starting with Joel Greenberg, who have stuff on him that could really hurt him in the public eye. And that is just not a position you would want the Attorney General to be in. Again, leaving aside even your judgment about what he did. But then third, by leaving aside, I mean whether or not he would be charged criminally. But I would submit there's a real issue here, also of fitness. This guy's got a lead over 100,000 people, about half of whom are women. And the report provides such a kind of tawdry account of how, imagine if you're a woman in the Department of Justice and you know the top guy was regularly exploiting women in this way and using them as kind of paid sexual playthings. That's got to be a leadership challenge. And then, maybe most importantly, the lying itself, right? He is so vehemently, adamantly saying, and it's part of the sort of Trumpian deep state notion that this all was completely concocted, etc. And I think we learn more and more and more that in every Trump controversy, there's a side that's lying and a side that's telling the truth. And Trump, as is almost always the case, is lying here. So this is a guy who really has no business being Attorney General of the United States. Oh, and again, MDMA and all, they're Schedule I controlled substances. Marijuana, people think of as differently, and they probably should, fine. But we're talking about substances that are the same as heroin, for example. This is the guy who would be charged with prosecuting the nation's drug laws. How are you going to responsibly do it? What's it going to say when somebody who's arrested for MDMA tries to make the claim at trial? The Attorney General does it all the time. This is a guy who just cannot credibly serve. And again, he didn't even have to go through the background investigation where he would have had an interview that would have been either a disaster or a whole parade of perjury. So what this leaves basically is the question, how the hell did this happen that Trump team was advancing? Did they know about this? You certainly know about it as a kind of general matter because he was investigated for potential crimes. Let me say, by the way, the crimes of the DOJ, the crime that he was being investigated for had to do with trafficking of a minor for sex, and that required proof that the girl he had sex with was taken over state lines. This is the witness we're told is problematic for the DOJ. It turns out that the ethics committee, and they addressed it, said we didn't find evidence of that. We found evidence of sex with a 17-year-old, including public sex that many people observed him having. But just to put a little dot on that, they didn't find, they say, the federal crime. It doesn't matter, right? None of this, again, has to do with, is he chargeable federally? It has to do with his qualifications. So what the hell? Did the Trump team simply not look into this so they could be blindsided? Did they know but kind of pretend they didn't, or not try to look very deeply? Did they, in fact, basically know, in which case Trump, by advancing him and trying to sort of push him through without a full background investigation, was really playing fast and loose and with fire with not just the Republican Senate, but the American people and the prudence and safety of the Attorney General? And then the same thing for Gaetz. What's the deal? Did he tell them? If he didn't tell them, how's he thinking he could possibly get through? Is it all planned to violate one more huge norm by having the Senate cut out of its role? Because if the Senate is not cut out of its role here, it's very hard to see how anybody could think for half a second that Gaetz would have been confirmed. So this is all separate and apart from everything the ethics committee says, everything that Florida would do, but just as a matter of Trump, of the identity of Team Trump, and Gaetz being a central figure in those circles, and just the kinds of norms that are being transgressed basically by the day. One quick point I would add, I think somehow Gaetz was looking to make the defense of, yeah, I paid a lot of women who had sex with me, but it was kind of like a date. I mean, like our first date, we took them to the Bahamas and gave them lobster dinner, and that's what you do when you're a chivalrous gentleman or whatever. That is, I think, what he would be getting at with his adamant denial of prostitution, which the committee found he did on a regular basis. Okay, so leaving him aside for the actual crimes, but just for what it shows about how Trump and his team are going about filling the federal government, this is a pretty important and illuminating report, and it ain't good. They were really looking, I think, to fast track and prevent review of someone whose thorough review would have revealed very fundamental failings to be the Attorney General in the United States, or really, as I said back then, hold any security clearance in the DOJ. Someone with his record would just been a non-starter, from the beginning. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.